Every day is a holiday, and March 5th, or 3/5, is Real Film Day in honor of 35mm film stock. You're watching Fear 20, and we're going back to the year 1920 that is, to talk about what Roger Ebert called the first horror movie ever made. I'm not sure if he was aware of the 1910 adaptation of Frankenstein. Maybe he was just ahead of his time on the whole Edison thing. But The Cabinet of Dr Caligari was probably the first feature-length horror film, and most assuredly one of the most influential, advancing the German Expressionist movement into the rapidly developing world of cinema. Where earlier films tried to capture reality as accurately as possible, Caligari took our ancestors to a place that existed only in the darkness of their minds. Reminiscent of the stage plays of old, the set designers painted landscapes onto flat canvases, depicting a town that was impossibly massive and angular, tapping into subconscious anxieties about the way modernization was distorting our society. A traveling doctor applies to put on an exhibition at the town's annual fair, an exhibition that would shock real and fictional audiences alike. Under the care of the doctor was a somnambulist, or a sleepwalker for you measly modern mortals, who had slept continuously for his entire life, awakening only under Caligari's command. His name is Cesare, and he can tell the future. He accomplishes this, naturally, by making the future happen by force. Except it's not really him that's doing it, but rather the doctor controlling him through hypnosis. Caligari believes himself to be the reincarnation of an ancient occult master, but is found to be insane and ends up in an institution for the mentally ill. The writers reportedly intended this to be a statement about the dangers of giving people authority over others, and how that power can lead to corruption and death. But then someone at the studio came up with this wraparound story where it turns out that the protagonist/narrator is the crazy one, with Caligari being the psychiatrist overseeing his care, which invalidated the moral of the original story and outraged the writers Hans Janowitz and Karl Mayr. The pair met shortly after World War I, the events of which had soured them on the ideas of authority and violence. The film's iconic visual style wasn't originally planned either. It was a very troubled production, full of last-minute decisions, miscommunications, and ironically, unreliable documentation. Everyone involved in the making of The Cabinet of Dr Caligari seemed to have their own version of how it went down, and the script itself wasn't available to the public until 75 years after its release. Even that bit I just said about the writer's intended message was a topic of debate and speculation for years, with set designer Herman Worm claiming Mayr had expressed no political opinions. It seems likely that they were simply upset that changes had been made behind their backs, and they retroactively ascribed meaning to what they had already written. If you're a die-hard genre fan or a film historian, the movie's worth seeing for yourself. But before I move on, I'd like to address one curious story attached to it. You see, Karl Mayr had been in love with an actress named Gilda Langer during the war. She probably would have been the female lead of the film, but she suggested Mayr should see a fortune teller. The mystic told Mayr that the apple of his eye would perish, and indeed, she died in 1920 of there's a smudge on the script here. It actually says Spanish flu. Much like the virus that took her life, Gilda's acting career is lost to history, with no copies of any of her films remaining. Fast forward a bit. It's 2005 and now you can do that. Cinema is an established art form with its own distinct techniques, technologies, and most importantly, masters. One such man, whose catchy name echoes in the halls of film schools across the world, is invited to direct an hour-long episode of a premium TV show that seeks to honor the legacy of fear that has lingered since the silent era. That name is John Carpenter, and that episode is titled Cigarette Burns. Featuring Udo Kier and starring some asshole nobody's ever heard of. Hold on, there's another smudge here. Norman Reedus? Huh. Anyway, he plays a down-on-his-luck film aficionado and former drug addict who takes on the job of hunting down rare films for wealthy collectors in order to fund his struggling movie theater, for which he is still deep in debt to his dead darling's dear old dad. To that end, Normal Reefer finds himself at the home of Udo Kier's bourgeois bastard Bellinger, who knows he is not long for this world and therefore wants the final privilege of seeing the most infamous movie within said world, Le Fin Absolu du Monde. Purportedly causing eruptions of violence every time it was shown, the mythically rare reel depicted the sacrifice of an actual Judeo-Christian angel, though perhaps not a sacrifice in the way we traditionally think of the act, as the angel is spiritually tied with the film itself, meaning that it can only ever die if the print is destroyed. So really, it's more of a torture than a sacrifice. The angel later found himself chained up in the center of Bellinger's opulent collection room, which is the only thing that finally convinced needless reindeer that Le Fin ever existed in the first place. Negotiating for the exact amount he needs to pay back his father-in-law, Ralphus begins his quest to uncover the truth about the legendary cursed film, meeting a few colorful characters along the way in a fashion that vaguely reminds me of The Big Lebowski. Each of them seems to know a little more about the bigger picture, and each has their own agenda for helping, or hindering, Napoleon Regiroc's investigation. Eventually, he finds his way directly to the source, recovers the print, and gets paid the money he so desperately needs. But this is no happy ending. Along the way, he's become increasingly affected by the film that he's been tracking down, suffering from hallucinations and finding himself in dangerous situations. I won't spoil the ending for you, but Carpenter chooses the darkest way possible to show us that anyone can make their own film, but that film in the wrong hands can be far more dangerous than any weapon. A more recent meta-film that's had people talking since it released in 2018 is Antrim, allegedly a lost and cursed film shot in the late 1970s. Like Caligari, it features a wraparound story that serves as an exposition dump and warns us of the potentially dangerous nature of what we're about to watch. The mockumentary portion at the beginning even references cigarette burns as well as The Ring, claiming that Antrim really is the kind of deadly flick that those fictional tales revolve around. The story follows siblings Nathan and Orly, whose beloved pet dog is put down after attacking the young boy. Nathan begs his mother in the car for some assurance that the golden retriever Maxine is in heaven, but the mom bitterly claims that this particular dog would not go to heaven after what he had done. Despite being the victim of the whole incident, Nathan still loves his dog, and never seems to blame her for the event. But a mother's words can have a deep and irreversible impact. Nathan is plagued by nightmares of his poor doggo in hell, so Orly decides it's time to do something about this. She takes her brother to a hidden forest, said to be the spot where Lucifer landed when he fell from heaven. There, she says, they will find the Antrim, or the entrance to hell. And they come along with camping gear and shovels to dig through the layers and save Maxine's soul. In terms of disturbing content, there's little for the hardened horror hound. Some pretty awful things do happen, yes, but none of it is gory or sensational in the way that many of us are used to seeing in other films. Much of the story is actually quite playful and wholesome. Instead, Antrim prefers to lean on its curse conceit, an unyielding stream of supernatural elements. I'm a sucker for occult and religious imagery in horror films, and this one has it in spades. In fact, maybe too much? Sigils and overlays are constantly flashing on the screen, most of them the seal of Astaroth, but also more that seem to be made up and honestly feel like cheap jump scares or distractions rather than anything of diabolical merit. But then again, I'm no Aleister Crowley, yet, and I suspect that Antrim is a bit smarter than I give it credit for. After all, you know what they say about the devil's greatest trick. I used to think that madness was synonymous with chaos, but it's not. And now I feel a bit of a stronger connection to filmmakers like David Lynch, who believe that linguistic concepts like this bind our thoughts, like the angel from Cigarette Burns, and that the power of the raw images captured on celluloid can break those chains and release greater meaning into the viewer. It's a tough pill to swallow for someone like me, for whom the weaving of words is my only real skill. Madness is not the same as chaos. You see, chaos is nature. It ebbs and flows without any regard for the fleshy lumps that try to swim through it. Nature is full of windfalls, tragedies, mutations, and misunderstandings that ultimately will be forgotten, if it ever was known in the first place. Trees do fall in forests when nobody's around. Chaos doesn't give a shit. It has no agenda. But madness is orderly, orchestrated by a mastermind, in a very specific sequence, at a very specific speed, and for very specific reasons. Madness has an agenda, and it is to alter your mind. Madness is film. It's been called the lie that tells the truth. And if even one single frame is in the wrong part of the reel, the viewer will hear that tree fall, but they won't quite see it hit the ground. And even if they don't realize they were supposed to, the lie and the truth within will fall apart. Something just unconsciously feels wrong about a filmic error. It leaves an imprint. Oh fuck, no, we're not making that video yet. Hey guys, this is Sarcanus. Thanks for watching. I worked really hard on this one, so please give it a like, subscribe if you're new. There's a lot that I didn't find the time to cover in this video, so if you'd like me to delve deeper into any of the movies that I've mentioned here, or if you have another idea for a video, leave them in the comments below.